Turn off this, then Imam will look better. Like turn on this light.
Yeah. Oh, thank
It's
you.
look much better now, eh?
It's
It's a
on.
natural look now.
It's on.
It's on? So are we going to start now?
Sure.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وعنده مفاتح الغيب لا يعلمها إلا هو ويعلم ما في البر والبحر وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها ولا حبة في ظلمات الأرض ولا رطب ولا يابس إلا في كتاب مبين. So today we come to a very important and critical point in the Sirah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we are in the month of Dhul Qa'dah, in the 6th year of the Hijrah. So this is the very end of the 6th year of the Hijrah and the beginning of the 7th year of the Hijrah. And this is the time in which the Prophet ﷺ finally achieved peace with the people of Quraysh in the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. And this really was one of the major turning points in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So this will be the subject for today's class, inshallah. As we've been discussing, ever since the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina from Mecca, there were a string of conflicts. Almost every month there is, and sometimes multiple times in one month, there are battles, there are military excursions, there are pressures, there are prisoners, there's loss of life, threat to the Medina society, siege, people are expelled. For these 6 years, it's been continuous. And when you add to that the 13 years of Mecca, in which the companions and the Muslims were tortured without any power at all, it's been 20 years, nearly 20 years of persecution and difficulty. And finally, this break happens. And this break, the beginning of this episode, it happens with a dream that the Prophet ﷺ has, that he dreams that he has entered Mecca with his companions, and that they are making tawaf, and that they're happy, and that after the Umrah they're all shaving their heads. So when he wakes up from his sleep, he informs the companions of this dream. And of course, when the Prophet ﷺ or any prophet has a dream, this is and can be a form of revelation. But in this case, yes, it is a foreshadowing of what will happen. It is Allah Ta'ala speaking to the Prophet ﷺ, indicating to him what will happen. But then he shares this dream and this vision that he has with the companions. And he gets them excited about this, that we are going to Mecca. Mecca is ours. It's almost as if it's already happened. And this reminds us, other than the revelation theology part of it, this is revelation and the Prophet ﷺ sees it. And this dream will be very important because we'll come back to it at the end of the story. But it's also the function of a leader to have a clear vision that you are able to articulate and inculcate in those around you. Any type of organization, whether it be a religious organization, nonprofit organization, commercial entity, family, sports team, whatever the case may be, any organized group of people, the person or the person at the top or somebody near the top needs to have this vision, this clear vision that people can coalesce around. And this was this moment that the Prophet ﷺ sees in his dream that they are performing Umrah in detail. So he's like, we're going. And remember, we said Dhul Qa'dah. So they leave Medina on Monday, the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah, in the 6th year of the Hijrah. So this is one of the sacred months, and this is the time in which people begin their path towards Mecca for those that are going to perform the Hajj. We've mentioned before that the Prophet ﷺ used to take one of his wives with him on his journeys usually. So in this journey, it was Our Lady Salama, alayhi salam, who left with the Prophet ﷺ. And because they were going to perform Umrah, many of them went. So it was the party that left Medina was 1,400 companions. And because they were going with this idea, with this vision. You know, they're like, okay, the Prophet ﷺ had this dream. He said we're going to Mecca, so we're going. So there's no need for us to take our weapons. There's no need to take for us our gear that we use to fight. But they had their everyday sword. So when you read that in the Sirah, you need to understand, you know, we have this concept now, it's called everyday carry, your EDC. You know, what's your, I think men, it's more like a man thing. We have this EDC, you know, what kind of keychain you have, what kind of multi-tool that you carry. Some of us carry knives, everyday carry. This was everyday carry at this time. So when the Sahaba have their sword, when you read later, when they meet Hudaybiyah, there's about to be a battle and they have their swords. These are not swords of fighting, but these are swords that they need if they're cutting rope, and if they find like a bush somewhere, they need to whack it. If they have to go hunting for an animal so that they can eat. This was normal. You know, when we were growing up, it was normal that in your car you had jumper cables. That was, you know, standard. You have jumper cables. And then some uncle in the mosque told us, for all the guys, because we used to wear shorts, you have to have some kind of long pants for when it comes time to pray. So our everyday carry were jumper cables and, you know, some kind of like sweatpants in the car. At this time, it was a sword. So you have to understand that that's what it was. It's like a cell phone. You're never going to leave without your cell phone, whether you're going for Umrah or you're not going for Umrah. So at this time, you would not leave anywhere without your sword. Okay, so these were not swords meant for fighting. There's no armor, there's no shields, there's no extra swords. They just go out with what they need. They arrive, you know, they make the path down southwards towards Mecca. They arrive at Dhul Hulayfa, and in this spot, this is one of the miqat spots, they enter into a state of ihram. So for the men, they remove all of their normal clothing, and then they wear unstitched garments, you know, traditionally the white garments. And this is, you know, the ultimate sign for us as Muslims. This is the ultimate sign of asceticism. This is the most ascetic you will get in Islam is when you're in that state of ihram, because of all these rules. You know, you don't want your hair to fall out. You don't want you bite your nails. You don't want to step on an insect. For the men, we're wearing these, you know, towels, and it's a constant reminder that you're in this state of ihram. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika lak. You constantly say the talbiyah until you arrive into Mecca. So they're in this totally otherworldly mode, right? Their mode is we're going to make Umrah because the Prophet ﷺ said that we're going to make Umrah. Now, some of the neighboring tribes that were associated with the Quraysh, they saw them, they knew that this was happening, so they blocked the Muslims from entering. And this is a real, this is very offensive, that during the sacred months, that you see people that are wearing ihram, and you stop them. And even till now, people that enter into Saudi Arabia that are wearing ihram, the people that are at the passport control, as difficult sometimes it is to deal with those people in any country, they have that extra sensitivity if they see somebody wearing ihram, because they don't want the sin of blocking someone from Allah's house to be on them. Then it was a problem, and it's even an issue now. So this is a very big statement, that you're preventing a pilgrim from entering the holy city of Mecca to perform tawaf, because the Arabs, the Jahili Arabs, they used to do that, as we mentioned in the way beginning. So the Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba's advice. He said, what do you think we should do? And Allah says in the Quran, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ, that وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, discuss things with people, have shura, have counsel with people. There's nothing wrong with the Prophet ﷺ seeking counsel from the companions. And this teaches us that if he sought counsel from the companions, then we can seek counsel from one another. And they all agreed that even though they did not come to fight, they would not let anyone prevent them from the Kaaba. You know, so they took this, you know, we've been fighting for nearly 20 years. It didn't come, you know, to this now. If they're going to prevent us, yeah, we'll fight, sure. You know, we have our everyday carry swords with us, and if this is what Allah wants, this is what Allah wants. I mean, they were ready to do that. But they said, but we didn't come, they're wearing ihram, we didn't come for this. Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, at this time still wasn't Muslim, he comes with a regiment, a cavalry regiment, towards the Muslims, and he sees them praying Dhuhr prayer. And he notices, oh, you know, they're doing this like funny movement where they go to the ground. He's like, this is perfect. The next time they do this, I can just kill them, you know, because when everyone's in sujood, no one's going to know. This is like sitting ducks. Well, he didn't say that, but you know what I'm saying. At this time, the verses of the fear prayer, Salatul Khawf, were revealed. So when Asr prayer came, the Muslims were praying in a different way. And the prayer of fear, there are different ways to pray it. But basically, there are different ways of praying it depending on where the enemy is. If the enemy is in front of you, if the enemy is behind you, where's the Qibla, etc. But basically what happens is that half of the Jama'ah goes through with the Rak'ah motion, and the other half of the Jama'ah remains standing. And then when the first group stands to begin the second Rak'ah, the second group that was standing, they perform the Rak'ah. So there's like that delay. So there's always somebody standing guard. And there are different ways of praying it, which is different than prayer in the thick of battle. So you see the importance of the prayer. This is an important lesson, that this is one of those things that we have, that there's, you're not going to escape from the prayer. There's no dispensation not to pray. Even in the thick of battle, and you have to pray, you can pray, but you say anything and it counts as prayer. So at this time, they're swinging their swords, you're like, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. That's Dhuhr prayer. It's done. Dhuhr prayer is done. So there's all of these rules around the prayer. We always learn that when you're very sick, you can pray even with your eyes. But there's no anywhere in the Sunnah that you don't pray for some reason. You're always going to have to pray. So the prayer of fear was revealed, the verses for the prayer of fear was revealed. So Khalid ibn Walid, he was not able to attack. He was not able to take them by surprise. They continue a little bit towards this in Hudaybiyah, that's why it's called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, this area. And there's the Prophet ﷺ took an unorthodox way towards Mecca. So when they were stopped, after they made ihram, rather than traveling the normal way, the Prophet ﷺ tried to find a way between the tribes that were blocking him. So he took this unorthodox path. Again, these details are important because they tell us how the Prophet ﷺ was thinking. He was not trying to create bloodshed or conflict. He didn't want this. And remember that verse, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْبٌ لَكُمْ. Fighting has been prescribed for you even though you dislike it. Who is this verse addressed to? It's addressed to the Prophet. He did not want to engage in all of these types of military functions, but he had to, because that was one of his roles. Anyway, this this unorthodox path took them to Al-Hudaybiyah. And at one point, the Prophet's camel, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-Qaswa, and this was one of the sunnahs of the Prophet, that he would name his riding animals, he would name his swords, he would name his bow and arrows. This is one of the sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ. And I even remember when we were growing up, we would name our cars. I mean, obviously, not necessarily kosher names, but anyway, we had names for our cars and things like that. I guess it's like a guy thing. Anyway, so Qaswat stopped in the middle of traveling, and the Prophet ﷺ, he told the companions, why are you stopping? And he said, the one who stopped the elephant has stopped the Qaswa. Habasahu habis al-fil. The story of Abraha and the fil and trying to destroy the Kaaba, that this was the area where the elephant stopped. So it had this ability that anybody that seeks to harm Mecca, will be prevented. This is sort of the idea. So they continue and they find a small river basin or a small lake, but it's very small. It's not enough water, and they're really exhausted by this time. They really want to drink water, and there's clearly not enough water for the 1,400 people. So the Prophet ﷺ takes one of his arrows from his quiver, and he gives it to the companions. He says, put this in the water. So he puts the arrow in the water, and everyone was able to drink from it. And this is one of the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. The increase of water, the increase of food, either from the blessed fingers of the Prophet ﷺ or from the effects of the Prophet ﷺ, here this being the arrow, are too many to describe. There are over 1,000 miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, as I've said before, as the ulama have taught us. And also this reminds us of the effects of the Prophet ﷺ, the athar, that the Muslims then, the companions then, and following them until our time, they seek the blessings, the barakah, from the artifacts of the Prophet ﷺ. Whether it be the hair of the Prophet ﷺ that many communities have, or whether it be articles of his clothing ﷺ, or parts of his staff or his sword, the tools that he used, alayhi salatu wasalam, or even drawing the blessed sandal of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and using that as a something that we wear or something that we put on our head as a sign of our humility, that we are under the feet of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they were all able to drink from this water. Now on the other side of the Hudaybiyah area are the Quraysh. So this is now the standoff. It's either they are allowed, they're going to fight, or they'll be allowed to go, or something's got to happen. There's no more unorthodox way to go to Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ, a negotiator came to warn the Prophet ﷺ that Ka'b ibn Lu'ay is on the other side of the Hudaybiyah area, ready to fight the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he kept reiterating the same thing. Now in this episode, it's interesting. The Quraysh, they kept sending the wrong guy. And that's a lesson in that you have to send the right person to do the job. Not everybody can be an ambassador. Not everyone can be a negotiator. Not everyone can be a preacher. Not everyone can be a teacher, irrespective of knowledge. Many of the people that we studied with, these are like world-class experts in different Islamic sciences. You wouldn't even want to invite them to dinner. They're so unsociable. But there's no one's more knowledgeable than them. You wouldn't invite them to dinner, let alone have them give the khutbah, or let alone have them give a public lesson. There are different roles. The companions were the same way. Companions had different roles to play. Some of them were eloquent, well-spoken, handsome, beautiful. Some of them were very rough and tough. Some of them were uneducated. But they were all the companions. We always refer to them as the companions, all of them, ajma'in. But they had different roles. When we talk next time about the ambassadors that the Prophet ﷺ sends, you'll see this more. That the Prophet ﷺ sends certain people for certain foreign diplomatic missions on purpose. The Quraysh, they kept getting it wrong. So they kept sending somebody different to the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet ﷺ, he said the same thing. He said, we're not here to fight. We're only here to perform Umrah, but if you prevent us from performing Umrah, we will fight. Same thing. He said that he was consistent. And that's another lesson, another sunnah, is just being consistent. Being honest and saying the same thing. If you're honest, you don't have to worry about being consistent because you just keep saying the same thing. But people that are always changing their story, embellishing this, embellishing that, in Arabic they say that lies do not have feet. Meaning that it's not going to have anything to stand on. When you say one lie, then you got to get a second lie to reinforce it, and then you got to get like two more lies to reinforce the reinforcement that reinforces the first lie, and then before you know it, it just proliferated into this huge thing. So there's a lot of back and forth, but the Prophet ﷺ, he kept insisting on the same thing, and then the Prophet ﷺ, and then one of the people from the other side, his name was Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. He came to see the Prophet ﷺ. And he is sitting next to the Prophet, and behind the Prophet ﷺ is Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. And Urwa, he keeps, every time he talks to the Prophet ﷺ, he keeps going like this. He grabs the Prophet's beard. The Prophet had a big beard, ﷺ. Right? Imagine that. I mean, I've had people touch my beard before. It's very uncomfortable. It's just too close, man. You've invaded my personal space. Aunties and stuff like that. But this was, it's like fighting motions. He's sitting talking and he keeps grabbing the Prophet's beard. And the Prophet doesn't do anything. And every time he grabs the Prophet's beard, ﷺ, Al-Mughira, who's standing next to the Prophet carrying his everyday carry sword, he takes the sword as it's sheathed and he takes the handle of the sword and he keeps whacking his hand. And he says, back off from the beard of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's like, yeah. And they keep talking. And he just goes over and grabs the Prophet's beard. He whacks his fingers. Back your hands off from the beard of the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam. So there is like little agitation. They're sending the wrong guy. That's not how you diffuse the problem. That's how you create the problem. If you send somebody that's gonna keep grabbing the Prophet's beard alaihi salatu wasallam. So he goes back to Quraysh. And he's like, nothing really. They don't have a story. He's like, he seems fine. What he's saying makes sense. They keep saying what he's saying makes sense. So the Quraysh, they don't know what to do because they are anticipating that there's going to be a fight. Why? Because Quraysh are the ones that have started the fight. Remember, all of the fight came from the Quraysh side, not from the side of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Quraysh, they're kind of caving in at this point. They're wearing ihram, they're just gonna, they're thinking they're just gonna let them pass. And they're like, okay, let's sleep on it. And that night, a contingency of the Quraysh, about 70 or 80 of them, they said, you know what, we're gonna go and we're gonna invade the Muslim camp in the middle of the night, and we're gonna kill them all. They're wearing ihram. They're gonna kill these pilgrims, like a guerrilla tactic. But the Prophet ﷺ always took the things that he, always took precautions. There were people standing guard at night, and these people were apprehended. And they were arrested and returned to the Quraysh. The Prophet ﷺ didn't kill them or, take them as prisoners of war or something like that. And this episode is narrated in Surah Al-Fath, verse 24. وَهُوَ الَّذِي كَفَّ أَيْدِيَكُمْ عَنْهُمْ. That the Prophet Allah has protected you from them. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, okay, now we need to send an ambassador to Mecca to find out what's going on. So he says, Umar, I want you to go. And then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu says, I'm not the guy for the job. Because I don't have anyone left in Mecca. That if something happens to me, they would, raise hell about it. If something happens to me, I don't have anyone that's going to care about me. Send Uthman. Uthman, Ben Umayyah. He's people, right? He has a community. So the Prophet says, okay. So they send Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu to Mecca. And because he's a person of stature in Mecca, you see the right person for the right job. I mean, you can't say that Sayyidina Uthman is better than Sayyidina Umar. The devil is scared of Sayyidina Umar. The Prophet ﷺ said when Sayyidina Umar walks down an alley, shaitan takes the next alley. Right? No one is going to be better than Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. But he's not the right person for that job. For that reason. So they send Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. There's no personal glory in this. They're there to serve the religion and serve the Prophet ﷺ. So they send Sayyidina Umar. He's given safe passage, of course, because he's a person of stature. And they say, oh, please come and make tawaf. And he says, I can't make tawaf if before the Prophet ﷺ. But he spends some time there. He talks to everyone, tries to cool things down. He's a person of stature. He's connected in that city. He's connected in that town. And he spends so much time there that a rumor starts, and this rumor reaches the Muslims that Sayyidina Uthman has been killed. Now, to kill an ambassador, and to kill someone like Sayyidina Uthman, who's a person of the town, that's serious. So all of the companions, they gave allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. They were hanging out by this tree, and they all put their hands as best as they could in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. They took this bay'ah, this allegiance, that they are going to stand together and they are going to fight if they have to, and avenge the life of Sayyidina Uthman if it is true. And then the Prophet ﷺ took his own hand and he said, this is for Sayyidina Uthman. Right? That this was serious. Now this is life or death. And the bay'ah, the allegiance, which a lot of this is in Surah Al-Fath. This is a sunnah of Islam. In this case, the bay'ah is like a allegiance, like a political, military allegiance, like an oath that you're going to take. You swear, like an officer's oath. There's also the spiritual bay'ah, which is something that we still retain. We have both kinds of bay'ah, but most of us, because we grow up as citizens of a country, that's that's implied in our being citizens, that we have an allegiance to the political unit we belong to. But the spiritual bay'ah also remains. When people take the bay'ah from a sheikh and they follow the sheikh's instructions, etc., this is an essential part of our faith. Anyway, this is called bay'at al-Ridwan. And they all take bay'ah that they are going to fight to the death, to defend themselves, their rights, to perform their umrah, and to avenge the death of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. This episode is verse 18 of Surah Al-Fath. So I'm just dropping the references for people that want to follow. Then Quraysh, they realize things have gotten way out of hand. And I find myself saying that every time we talk about Quraysh. Everything got out of hand for them all the time. They just did not know what they were doing from the very beginning. They sent Suhail ibn Amr, and when the Prophet ﷺ saw him coming, he told the companions, Alhamdulillah, good things are going to come, because they sent this guy. So the Prophet ﷺ, every time they would send someone, he said, you see this guy, he's a liar. But the Prophet ﷺ would tell him the same thing. We didn't come to fight, we only came to perform Umrah, but we'll fight if we have to. So the Prophet ﷺ, he knew how to read these people, but he didn't let that affect the way he spoke with them. He was consistent. So when he saw Suhail, he understood that Quraysh wanted to make peace. He said, this guy is not the guy that's going to agitate us. We'll make peace. They agreed on 4 things. This peace treaty, there were 4 main conditions, or 4 main clauses. The first is that the Prophet ﷺ would return to Medina. They would not perform Umrah this year, and they would come back the following year, exactly 1 year from the date, and they would be able to perform Umrah. Which means that they would have to break their ihram without performing Umrah. Number 2 is that they would not fight one another for 10 years. Which, if we don't count the Meccan period, is more than the time that has elapsed since the Hijrah, because now we're at the end of year 6. Anyone who is free to choose which side they want to follow, either the side of Mecca or the side of Medina. So anyone in the Arabian Peninsula is free. If people want to join Quraysh, they can join Quraysh. If people want to join Islam, they can join Islam. And number 4, any Meccan that converted and fled to Medina must be returned to Mecca. These are the 4 conditions. We'll talk about them momentarily. And the Prophet ﷺ agreed, and he brought Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he said, Ali, you write. So the Prophet ﷺ is dictating, because the Prophet ﷺ did not write. So the Prophet said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Imam Ali wrote, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Suhail said, who is Allah and who is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? We don't agree, say it, Bismika Allahumma. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Ali, erase it and write Bismika Allahumma. Imam Ali erased it, he wrote Bismika Allahumma. And then he said, this is what Muhammad Rasulullah agrees. And so he said, oh, who's Rasulullah? If you were Rasulullah, we wouldn't prevent you from coming. Right, this is from Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Ali, erase it, write Muhammad, the son of Abdullah ibn Abdullah. And Imam Ali said, Wallahi, I will never erase it. So the Prophet ﷺ showed me where it is, and he wet his fingers and he erased it himself. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And this happens in the Sirah frequently, in which the companions disobey the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam out of respect and love for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So he said, Bismika Allahumma, yeah, okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Bismika Allahumma, they're fine. But to erase Muhammad Rasulullah, never. This is the adab, the manners and the belief and the love that they had for this man, alayhi salatu wasalam, that they would never erase it. He said, I would never erase it, even if it means we're going to perish or you're going to chastise me in public. I will never erase that. This is the truth. You are Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's kind of the attitude that they had. Like when Sayyidina Abu Bakr was leading the prayer and the Prophet ﷺ was sick, and then he came and then Sayyidina Abu Bakr wanted to come back and let the Prophet lead the prayer, and the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, you lead the prayer. He didn't. He disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ. So in fiqh, we have a rule based on all of these circumstances that the adab, the manners and our etiquette with the Prophet ﷺ are in advance of following his instructions, which is really why we say Sayyidina Muhammad in everything that we do, like in the tahiyyat of the prayer. When the Prophet, the hadith that narrates the Salat al-Ibrahimiyya, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ali Sayyidina, in the prayer, it's not narrated Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. It just says Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, kama sallayta ala Ibrahim, without the Sayyidina. But we add the Sayyidina out of respect. So this is the reason why is these type of circumstances, and we can go on and on that, but you get the point. As the Prophet ﷺ was signing this, Suhail's son, who was writing with the Quraysh side, Abu Jandal, Suhail saw him and struck him on the face. And he said, he beat him in public. He said, this guy comes back with us. And Abu Jandal is like pleading to the Prophet, saying, please, don't do this. So the Prophet said, yeah, but he appeared before we actually signed the contract. And then Suhail said, no, it's binding. You signed the contract. Anybody from Mecca that becomes Muslim must be returned to Mecca. So the Prophet is, diplomatically trying to wiggle out of the situation. And Suhail no, if you don't return him, the whole thing is off. So the Prophet says, okay, Abu Jandal, you got to go back with your father. And he's like being beat in front of all of the Muslims, in front of the Prophet. I want everyone to pay attention to this part of the story. For me, this is for us the most important part of the story. Abu Jandal. Abu Jandal is being beaten for being a Muslim in front of the Prophet ﷺ and all of the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling him to go back with his father to Mecca. And as he's being dragged away, Sayyidina Umar is like, he comes up to him and he's like whispering, like, be strong, don't worry, we're gonna come and get you, everything's good. He's like trying to like encourage him, right? Remember this. Remember the name Abu Jandal. Okay, so they had to break their ihram. Now the Muslims by this time, they feel like totally defeated. They're like, we were gonna fight, we did this bay'ah thing, Sayyidina Uthman, what just happened? No Umrah. What happened to this vision that we're going to perform Umrah, we're cutting each other's hairs, and we're so happy and all of this kind of stuff? So the Prophet ﷺ, no one wants to listen to him. So he goes inside his tent, and Salama is like, look, you want to break your ihram? You go outside, don't say anything, get your barber, let him cut your hair. Don't say anything. And they will follow, right? So this is the Prophet ﷺ taking the advice of his wife. So it is the sunnah to take the advice of your wife. It is the sunnah to take the advice of your wife. Don't abuse this, just take it for what it is. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gets out of his tent, he calls for his barber, he shaves his head. So khalas, the Umrah, ihram is over. So everyone has to, shave their head or cut their hair. And they do it and they're like crying. And in the hadith it says they almost cut each other's heads off. They almost nicked each other as they were cutting their hair because they were so sad, they were so grief-stricken. At this point, some of the women from Mecca that were Muslim came to the Prophet ﷺ to give their allegiance. This is also covered in Surah Al-Mumtahana, verses 10 to 12. And because the contract or the peace treaty, rather, did not mention women, only specifically mentioned men, the Prophet ﷺ accepted their bay'ah, accepted their allegiance, and they came with the Prophet ﷺ. And also, at this time when these verses were revealed, many of the companions had non-Muslim wives, pagan wives. They also divorced their wives at this point. This was when this hukm came, and they parted with their, wives that did not accept Islam. So before we continue to Abu Jandal, which is really important, what does all this mean at this time? Now we have foresight, so we know what this means now. But at the time, where was the vision of the Prophet ﷺ? You have to understand that this whole thing meant that the Prophet ﷺ won. The fact that they signed a peace treaty, you only sign a peace treaty with somebody that's of equal stature as you. So they're implicitly acknowledging that Medina is a nation, is a state, and that this man, alayhi salatu wasalam, is the head of the state. And therefore, if we write this contract or this treaty and we sign it, it's going to be binding. And he's going to follow it, and we're going to have to follow it. So the Prophet ﷺ already won. He already won by the simple fact that they've acknowledged this. And this often happens in conflicts. If you study conflicts, even in this country or wherever, when the superior side acknowledges the existence of the other side, it's a huge victory for the other side. Even if the superior side ends up prevailing, like in the American Civil War. But the Confederacy, which set itself up as a country with its own constitution, all that kind of stuff, had an army that was, beating the Union Army up until, the very end. So the Union had to, acknowledge that was a force that they had to do. Anyway, so that was one huge thing. Just the fact that they were going to sign this treaty. The other thing is that who was stopping the fight? It's Quraysh, not the Prophet ﷺ, because they didn't fight. They were just responding. So when the Quraysh was saying, we're going to stop fighting, that means that they are acknowledging that they can't fight anymore. They could have easily said, you go back, and not added that thing about peace for 10 years. But now, you go back, okay, no big deal. You can break your ihram, slaughter the animal, and come back the next year. No big deal. Peace for 10 years, and anybody can become Muslim, and we have to respect that. So what does the Prophet ﷺ immediately do when he goes back? He starts sending all these letters to all of these other tribes. And that's how, the peninsula ends up coming into Islam. It's because of this treaty. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's seeing all of this. If we were the companions, we would have been upset too. We're speaking now from hindsight. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he's writing this, he sees this advantage. He's like, I'm going to have 10 years to make da'wah, unencumbered. Who's going to win? Him or these bozos that don't know how to send the right person to talk to? The Prophet easily will win. The only difficult part was this idea that this guy is being beaten and taken back, to Mecca. And we know that the Muslims in Mecca are not going to be treated well. But the fact that there are still Muslims in Mecca and they have to stay means that Islam now has a seat in Mecca. I mean, the Quraysh also, when I was reading this, I was surprised that they themselves didn't see this. Now they have to keep the Muslims in Mecca because it's part of the contract. And now they have to send them back. So these people are going to have family members that are going to ask them, why are you Muslim? So it's like another form of da'wah. They're going to find out why they're Muslim, this and that. So this is a little bit of how we look at, this is why this is a huge moment in the Sirah. This really is like the flood. After this, everything is downhill. Alhamdulillah for the Prophet ﷺ. So the companions, even though they broke their ihram, they're stressed out that I thought what happened to this dream? And they say to the Prophet, but you told us that he said, but I didn't say it's going to be this year. I just said that we were going to enter Mecca. But I never said that it was going to be this year. And with that statement, he was able to turn their understanding. That, yeah, okay, he's right. Okay, technically he didn't say, we thought it was this year, but it doesn't have to be this year. And alhamdulillah, things progress after that. Abu Jandal. Right, Abu Jandal. So, there was another guy who was persecuted in Mecca. His name was Abu Basir. Abu Basir fled Mecca and he ends up in Medina. The Prophet ﷺ has returned to Medina, the companions are back in Medina, they're hanging out, and then this guy comes from Mecca. Now this is like the first real test, or another test of this contract, of this peace treaty. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Abu Basir, you have to go back. So he sends him back to Mecca with two Meccans that came after him, two Qurayshis that came after him. So Abu Basir, the Muslim, is going back to Mecca with these two Qurayshis. On their way back, he kills one of his captors and comes back to Medina. So here the Prophet ﷺ is, he sees two people coming, not three. Abu Basir and, this guy behind him, he looks very distressed. Prophet ﷺ, what's happening? What's going on? So the Quraysh says, he killed my companion. So now it's a big problem. Not only is he's not listening to the Prophet ﷺ, but he killed this guy. So the Prophet ﷺ, you have to, it's not going to work. We signed an agreement, you have to go back. Abu Basir flees Medina. He runs away from the Prophet ﷺ, and he goes to what is now the area of Jeddah, the city of Jeddah. Who meets him there? Abu Jandal. Abu Jandal also escapes from Mecca and goes to Jeddah. And then all of these renegades join. Abu Jandal grows this group of renegades to 300. So these are our Muslim activists, right? These are the justice, no peace people, right? We have these people now that say justice, no peace, right? They could not accept the fact that the Prophet ﷺ made peace, but yet there are these injustices happening. And this is why Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, he says that peace is before justice, not the other way around. Because if you keep insisting on justice, you can annihilate everyone and be the last person standing and say, oh, now we have peace. But, the world is imperfect. And look, it's easy for us to say that because we say this from a place of comfort, but this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet saw Abu Jandal being beat by the man he just contracted with this peace. And he said, you have to go back with your father. So 300 Muslims from Mecca are hanging out in Jeddah. They have like their own little community, right? This is the Muslim activist Facebook page of that time. They're the only, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. So they start taking action against Mecca. So they find all of these Meccan caravans and they start raiding them. And they start fighting the Meccans. Even though the Prophet ﷺ, this is totally unbelievably far out. The Prophet ﷺ told them, you can't do this. So they're not with the Prophet, they're with the Prophet in the sense that they're Muslim, but they're not following what the Prophet, if the Prophet ﷺ told you to jump, you would say how high. You wouldn't even ask, if he told you to jump off a cliff, you would just jump off the cliff. You wouldn't be thinking of asking or challenging him. But clearly the Prophet ﷺ did not sanction them, which is why the people of Quraysh did not take action against the people of Medina, because they knew that these were renegades. Hanging out in Jeddah, every day a few more people leave Mecca, they hang out in Jeddah, there's 300 of the people that fought in the Battle of Badr. I mean, at that time, that was a lot of people. When the Muslims came to Medina, there was less than 300 Muslims. I mean, there's a lot of people. And they're fighting Quraysh and they're raiding the caravan. These are the Muslim activists, the misguided Muslim activists. And I'm going to keep saying that until people understand. The misguided Muslim activists. The Meccans, they came to the Prophet to complain. They said, please help us out. We made peace with you, but what are we going to do with these people? So the Prophet said, okay, I'll help you out, but we have to have an addendum to the contract, to the peace treaty. We have to amend the peace treaty and allow me to take these people into Medina. So he said, oh, whatever you want. At this point, whatever you want. Not even a year has passed. We're talking about really right after this, months maybe. They signed this addendum, amendment to the peace treaty, which happens all the time, by the way. Anytime you put something in a contract, know that it will be amended. And then even the constitution is amended. And then the Prophet ﷺ sends a letter to Abu Basir to tell him that we've amended it. But by this time, Abu Basir got sick and he was on his deathbed. And he sees the letter of the Prophet ﷺ and he knows that he's been forgiven for what clearly got way out of hand. And he wipes the letter of the blessed with the seal of the blessed Prophet ﷺ over his face and he passes away. Radiallahu anhu. So the reason I think this is important for us is because when we deal with meta issues, the reason we have first principles is so we don't get lost. If the Prophet ﷺ insisted that Abu Jandal be returned, even at the risk of violating or reneging on the peace treaty, the Quraysh could have attacked the Muslims and all of these 1,400 people could have died. If the Prophet ﷺ didn't sign this peace treaty, he would have not had the opportunity to send all of those letters to all of these people, not just in the Arabian Peninsula, but the Romans, the Byzantines, the Najashi, the Muqawqis in Egypt, Bahrain, Yemen, Persia, oh my God, everybody. Everybody received a letter from the Prophet. And these letters still exist till today, some of them, of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, of course he's hurting on the inside for what's happening to Abu Jandal on a personal level. But there's a greater issue. And the greater issue has to be controlled and regulated by these first principles. And that's why these first principles are so important. But when you give up on these first principles and you're focused on the detail, that's when you become like a renegade. And all of the Khawarij, not that these were Khawarij, because this was a slightly different for obvious reasons, but all of the Khawarij groups throughout Islam, this is really at the core. At the core is that it's like a form of arrogance above and beyond the initial or those first principles and not wanting to submit to them. Anyway, we can go on and on about that. So that ends this episode of the Renegade. In the beginning of the year 7, just a couple months later, Amr ibn al-As becomes Muslim, Khalid ibn Walid becomes Muslim, and Uthman ibn Talha becomes Muslim, radiallahu anhu ajma'in. All because of the treaty that the Prophet ﷺ made with them. So this is a tremendous shift in the Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ. After this, it's going to be a totally different rhyme or reason. I mean, we're out of the weeds, alhamdulillah, and huge things are about to happen globally now, not just locally. We'll talk about that next time, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Questions? Yeah.
I believe you said that Suhail, when on the treaty itself, when they started to write Bismillah he said, who was Allah? I thought that,
Who was Ar-Rahman?
Oh, Ar-Rahman. Okay. Well, my question was going to be, I thought that they did recognize the concept of Allah, but that they had lesser.
Yeah. So Allah is like for like the big stuff, but then the small stuff, like the everyday stuff, and that and Uzza, all that kind of stuff. But the big stuff, Allah, which is what happens with Pharaoh, right? When the waves crash in on Pharaoh, he says, I believe, right? Because there's no more opportunity for the veils. But Allah says it's too late. So he sees. So they're called polytheists because they associate, the mushrik associates with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they had a belief of Allah. Of course, misguided belief. But it was a Rahman and Rahim. Because for them to agree to that, then they would agree with the theological notion of Tawheed, which they didn't want to agree. Sorry if I misspoke about that.
No, I probably should say.
Everyone's so excited, mashallah. I was excited about the renegades, man. Muslim activists, even back then.
So that they didn't impute that on the Muslims of Medina, their acts.
No, because they knew that they were renegades. They had disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ and they went out on their own.
But later on, aren't there affiliated tribes with the Quraysh that attack?
Yeah, and Abu Sufyan himself will end up coming to the Prophet ﷺ to forgive the breach of the contract and beg him to just continue it.
But couldn't they say that they were renegades as well?
Well, it was them. It was not like this. Because the Prophet ﷺ ordered him to go back. Abu Basir and Abu Jandal in front of them.
Okay.
So they have stepped out of what they knew that the Prophet ﷺ had agreed to, which is why they came and said, okay, take them, and then we'll stop this problem. And remember, the Quraysh are weaker. They're on a weaker footing.
Mm-hmm.
By this point, economically, the Muslims are in the north, so they control the trade routes to the north. Numerically, the Qurayshi might be more in number. They're all like scattered. But the Muslims are like really a small, agile powerhouse. So the Prophet eventually will take that upper hand and just ride it to the conquest of Mecca.
So, how come the Quraysh, they used to attack Muslims? How come they didn't attack the renegades?
Well, it's all like guerrilla warfare, and there's only 300 of them, so they're attacking the caravans. And Jeddah, at that time, which is not like the current Jeddah, it's a little bit more south. It's far at that time from Mecca. It's like an hour and a half drive from downtown Jeddah to Mecca now. So you can imagine on horse or on foot, quite a distance. So they're like, in the bush, attacking things at night, guerrilla warfare.
So does the general have a meaning? What does it mean?
I don't know. It has a meaning, I'm sure. I don't know. Yeah.
Speak to the misguided Muslim activism that you're referring to as far as today, just so you can understand so they can discern what is misguided and what is not?
Well, a lot of it is like what I was saying today at Jummah, people that feel somehow the political process will be our salvation. That somehow we're going to get some like magic Salah ad-Din figure in office somewhere, and then magically everything will fall in place. But it's not like that. We have systemic problems that have nothing to do with us as Muslims, we just have systemic problems. The fact that you, I'm going to make a House of Cards reference. I apologize to I think it's like in the first season, the guy that used to make the ribs. I know you guys all watch House, so it's okay. He ends up working in the White House. He's an African American, and I think he has like a nephew, like a little kid, and he like meets the president, and the president's like, "Oh, what do you want to be? When you grow up?" He's like, "I want to be the president of the United States," and then Kevin Spacey's like, "You can be whatever you want to be," and then Kevin Spacey leaves, and the guy's like, "Don't listen, that's BS. You're never going to be president of the United States." Because that's the real facts, is that you can't. You have to be part of interest groups. You have to raise an exorbitant amount of money. This system is fundamentally flawed, and no khair will come from that until that changes. The fact that companies and foreign interest groups can spend unlimited amounts of money to put a candidate into office, And this is exactly what happened when the Roman Empire started to decline. They sold, the premiership, the proconsul, all of these positions were sold. And when you sell political office, it's just a matter of time between the whole thing comes crashing down. So Muslims that, throw their souls into that, thinking that that's where our salvation is going to come from, that's misguided. Our salvation is going to come when we follow the sunnah of the Prophet. So it happened for them, it will happen for us. That's all we have to do. It doesn't mean that we sit around and be passive, like, whatever happens, happens. No, but we are fragmented ourselves with our own Islam. Many of us are ignorant with our own faith, whether it's a practice or whether it's theologically. Those are the things that we need to improve so that we can be lifted up. That's what it's not like a secret. It's not like it's a secret sauce that only I know. We know that, but we don't do it. So people that put their activities and their Islam and those type of things, that's one of the forms of misguidance. The other thing is lambasting all of these like Muslim majority countries, from the comfort of their couch here in North America. If what we said about the American system is true, you can only imagine what it is like in those other political systems. And many of these regions are still in the post-colonial stage. The remnants of colonialism is still there. The Ottoman bureaucracy is still the sub bureaucracy of the Arab world. It's still Ottoman, the government. So these are, that's just garbage. We can't be like that, pointing out to these people and just pointing at the mistakes and things like that. That's not helping anyone. That's not helping anyone. We can go on and on and on. What we need to do is we need to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in all of its aspects. That's the message. It's as easy as that.
So I'm still not clear though. What level of political participation are you advocating or not advocating?
You can be as politically involved as you want, but not in the name of Islam. That's my only thing. I would be a very bad politician, but there are some people that are, they're good for that.
I see what you're saying.
So if people study law or politics or economics and they want to go into policy, somebody's got to do it. It's important. But I'm just saying that I don't want people to think that if you do that, you somehow are going to create this utopic society. That's not going to happen. That really only comes from the divine. When Allah decides to make something like that, then things fall in place. But if you look at Robert Carroll, the power broker, he wrote this 1,000-page book about this. I think it was Robert Moses, who was the city planner in New York City. And the level of corruption and money and power that this unelected person had over New York City, one of the most important cities in the world, is just mind-boggling. He was unelected. If people want to be involved, that's fine. I'm all for that. I'm not going to do it, but that's fine. But don't bring Islam into that. That's what I'm trying to say.
When you say don't bring Islam into that, I think that for a lot of Muslims, they are motivated by their faith in order to enter into these organizations to improve the welfare of society of their community in general. Now, are you saying that is?
No, that's fine. If they feel like public service is like giving back to the community and that's what motivates them, that's fine. That's a personal thing. But you can't go into this process and think I'm the Muslim candidate. I'm the Muslim voice. You're not. The real Muslim voice would be the furthest point away from partisan politics there possibly is. Nothing to do with. I want nothing to do with that. Which is why when people come to me for counsel, and some of you have come, I say the only condition: no lawyers. If a lawyer gets involved, I have nothing to do with this. If you want me to help, I'll help I'll stay with you till the cows come home. But the minute you get the system involved and the courts involved, I'm gone. I have nothing to do with that. So that's what I'm trying to talk about. Personal motivation, that's fine. And it's okay to talk about, one's identity. Obviously, if you're a Muslim and you're different, if you're a woman, you wear hijab. I mean, of course, that's going to be. I'm not saying that you hide your Islam. I'm not talking about that. But it's not. You can't use Islam as something to trade with and something to get votes for, and then therefore to convince your own Muslim community. Like when the elections happened the last couple of years, all the Muslim candidates that came here, every single one of them asked me to endorse them. So I'm not endorsing it. I didn't even know what you're running for. And they were like disappointed. But like the Jewish community, like the Catholic community. I said, yeah, that's on us. We can't do that. I can't be in this role and do that. I'm sorry. And they were very upset, like I was like un-Islamic that way. That's what I'm saying is dangerous.
So you can't claim you are the emissary of Islam.
Yeah.
But isn't sometimes that's not your choice to make sometimes? If you're a Muslim, you're running into this world, then you'll be labeled a Muslim.
That's
Whatever comes out your mouth.
Hey man, if you want to run, it comes with the turf, right? I mean, that's why I wouldn't run. If somebody came and asked me, I said, don't do it. Japanese Americans, they're fine. They didn't have to run. Many other ethnic groups, they're thriving in America. They didn't have to run in office and political power, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. Which is, don't prostitute your religion. I'm sorry, just don't do that. Don't, and not just Islam, but the other religious groups. They're worse than we are. We're just like, we're miskeen. We're just starting to stand. We're like toddlers. Like we're like standing and walking, not crawling anymore. The other groups openly, they endorse synagogues and whole congregations endorse candidates. Who's that guy? That evangelical Rick Warren. So Rick Warren, you see what he did is when he, I think when Obama and McCain were running, he held a debate at his church, and he gave a platform to each candidate. I respect that. He gave a platform to each candidate, and at the end of each town hall or whatever it was, he told them that was a home run. That was a home run. I remember that. He said it to both, and he was asked why. He's like, I just want to encourage them, but he didn't. I don't know if he openly took a stance, but I respect that. That's a proper way of doing it. Offer this platform to educate our community, but everyone's got to be. Which is, by the way, I think the rules of like 5014C or 504, whatever it's called. But we're a 5013.
Yeah, you can't endorse political candidates.
Yeah, anyway, by law we can't. And there's a reason why. I'm very, very much against this, if you can't tell. So, I find it offensive. Like when we used to go to ISNA, there was like this one family, Muslim Republicans. That didn't upset me. What upset me is the fact that we all laughed at them. Because there's an assumption, how could you be Muslim and a Republican? That's the danger. That's the danger. You could be Muslim and wear a MAGA hat. I mean, I wouldn't do that. Or you could be Muslim and wear who knows, the Kamala, is that the leading person now? Harris. Right. They're saying that she's a...
But isn't that like a minority? That's a minority problem everywhere. They want to stick together to one cause. You will see that with African Americans. You'll see with all minorities. That if somebody is like a Republican, no, don't go there because they're not good to the whole community. When the community grows and becomes as big as any other major community, then that won't be a problem. But
yes, in theory, but both parties are essentially the same thing. You should watch the documentary An Unreasonable Man. Have you guys seen that? Ralph Nader. He is one of the most respectable people in Potomac. They ostracized him to the point is that both the Republicans and the Democrats agreed that they would not allow him to be part of their debates. So they have like the committees, they control, I didn't know this until I saw the document, they control who speaks at the debates. So they're like, no, this is like, you're too embarrassing. It's like, like when like somebody becomes religious in your family, and like they stop shaking hands or they start wearing hijab, like we're not going to invite that person to dinner. The route there was like that, like we're not going to invite him. They wouldn't even talk to him in the green room, he said. Watch that documentary. They're the same, two sides to the same coin, both those parties. We had a chance with Ross Perot. to, he gave up and then he started again and then he gave up. Islam is above that. Religion is above that. It's got to be above partisan politics. You want to be involved politically, that's fine. You want to educate the Muslim community about the issues, that's fine. But these issues have no absolute right or wrong. Fiscal policy, immigration, and of course when I say that, people think that, how could you say that? Didn't you see the picture of the father and the daughter or the son, drowned? How about the Palestinian kids that are kicked out of their homes, the Rohingya that are, dying in mass graves, the Uyghurs that Islam is being erased for them? No one cares about these people. 2 people drowned, and now I can't look at the picture, and I don't want to look at the picture. How about all of the millions of Muslims? We have been systematically beat on since the time of the Prophet until today. We are like amongst the most persecuted people historically. So, I'm sorry, if you open this, we just keep going and going and going. But this idea that these issues have absolute moral rights and wrongs is not true. It's an opinion, it's ijtihad. I think that this policy is better, I think this is better, I think we should do it this way, I think we should do it that way. I mean, at least that's how it's supposed to be. But now there's so many hidden interests, you don't even know what people mean.
You're right, there's no perfect, but you need to choose from the choices that are available.
Yeah, make the best choice you can.
You can't pick both, that's not an option.
Or you could, they'll just invalidate your ballot.
Yeah, exactly.
You just go down the line.
What about many countries that use Islam religion and put that into the constitution and rule?
That's different. That's what we were talking about at Juma. That's high politics. Is that Islam is the religion of the state. Right?
You say like
no, because that's above, that's in the constitution. That's not about like policy. And that like the Sharia is like the major form of the legal system or one of the major, and there are different clauses for that. That complies with Islamic governance at the highest level, that this is an Islamic state, which is different from what we were talking about today, Dar Islam, which is like the ability to practice Islam. So this means, okay, officially the state is Muslim because we're a majority, so we can say that the state, that's the official religion of the state, which is very important from an Islamic governance point of view. But after that, there is no Islam, there should be no Islam in the politics, as I was saying. But that doesn't always happen because in many countries, in many Muslim majority countries, you have Muslim political groups. Muslim Brotherhood, AKP, all these kind of same thing. People leave Islam because of that. Because they say, we're the Muslim political group, okay, we're Islam. And that implies that you're not Islam. You're the deep state or whatever. You're like the Zionist, CIA, whatever, just like some boogeyman. And then these people are the most unorganized people. And because they have no connections with the actual deep state, they're always going to lose. So when they lose, all the people, like the young people like us, that believe in that stuff, they say, wait, I thought we were right. I thought we're Islam. How could we be Islam and we'd be wrong? And how could we be Islam and then we lose? And a lot of people leave Islam, they disbelieve altogether because of those political groups. I saw it in Egypt. After all that stuff that happened with Morsi and Rabah and all that kind of, many people left Islam. Islam. Can you imagine that your religion is tied up with some political boss person? I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not supposed to be. When we get to talk about the Prophet ﷺ talking with the other tribes, we will see the Prophet ﷺ never interfered in the inner workings of other nations. He just said, Islam Taslam, you'll become Muslim and you'll be safe and free. But he never told them, change the person that's running this, change the minister that does this, you have to form yourself like this. He didn't do that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His message wasn't about that. So even from the Sunnah, even from the Prophet, we see this difference between the high politics and the low politics. Look, I know what I'm saying is not easy, and I'm clearly very passionate about it. And there are a lot of examples, and the Muslim world is so dilapidated that I think sometimes we're like, what's the solution? I understand that I don't have the solution, but I think that this idea that Islam and partisan politics, I will continue softly to mention it, inshallah, until the day I die, because it's so important. And it's really important for other religious groups in this country to hear this message. I mean, at the end of Ramadan, I spoke at a school, And I mentioned this, and a lot of the non-Muslims in the audience, they felt that they were very happy that I said that. They're like, yeah, I wish our church would stop doing this, or I wish our synagogue would stop doing that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammad